All right. Neil says we are live with Through a Therapist's Eyes, the YouTube version. We are going to be covering compassion getting confused with codependence. So if you're finding us for the first time on this platform, we do Thursday nights. A little bit of a before the scenes that you'll see on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all of that. So this is the way we interact with you so that you can kind of get on the YouTube live, subscribe, pop questions, pop comments, and we embed them into the show actually sometimes. So this is Mr. John Pope hanging out with us. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. Thank you very much. And you, Chris?
You know, I was looking. We finally got the TV turned on, Victoria, out in the lobby today. I'm sorry.
No, I thought you were going to harp on me because you're the one that did it. And it's technically my job to make sure that it's on.
I think I did harp a little bit. I apologize. Anyway, it was cool because we were like, you were like, I hadn't seen you, and seeing you on the YouTube live, it was fun, John, because you brought a cool presence on the YouTube live.
Well, thank you.
Which you must be doing right now, actually.
Well, I feel very honored to do this now. I feel like I'm on the spot. So
you're
now you do a good job.
Compliments back to back.
thank you.
Man, we all love you.
Well,
you.
I love you too.
And then we got Victoria.
I love you this much.
I'm kidding.
And Victoria.
I'm kidding. And Victoria Pendergrass is on the panel with us. So let me see. I guess we're ready to rock and roll. Yeah.
Well, it's all rock and roll to me.
The YouTube.
That was a Billy Joel reference.
I love the songs, man. You are loaded full of songs. Yeah, we'll do all the other cool intro stuff next.
All right, you got your stuff ready?
Yeah.
Timer?
Yeah. He knows that. Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, this is Through a Therapist's Eyes. Getting close to... I don't even want to say that out loud to these people. Can we just start over? I just screwed up. Anyway, never mind. I know y'all don't know what I'm thinking about, but that's by design. Anyway, February the 22nd is the date today. And, huh?
But I'm feeling 22. Sorry.
You're going to start doing songs now, too?
I mean, I'm wearing a Taylor Swift shirt today.
Oh,
so
dear.
I might as well sing a Taylor Swift song.
She is wearing a Taylor Swift song. Wow. I don't even know what to do. This intro is completely screwed up. We are going to be talking about compassion, getting confused with codependence. We have John Pope with us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing outstanding. Thank you.
And Miss Victoria Pendergrass, already pre-established as a Taylor Swift.
Cut my hair, chopped my hair off, and I changed my part. I feel like I'm...
Your hair looks very nice.
Thanks.
It looks fairly nice.
Cut off like 5 or 6 inches.
That's a lot.
I
That is a lot.
overheard you talking about that, and I did not want to interject. And
It's okay.
and I think it looks very nice.
Thanks. I feel like I lost 5 pounds.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I almost need to see a before and after
Yeah.
thing in the way my brain works.
I'll show it. I'll do a before and after.
So what do we need to say? This is where you get insights directly from a panel of therapists in your home and time in your car, but not the delivery of therapy services in any way. The 3 questions that we want you to think about today are, do you know what codependence is? Think of examples of this, like real down to day-to-day examples. Like, do you really know how this works out potentially in life? And an interesting question, I can't wait till we get to that segment and talk about, I'm curious what the panel's going to say about what is the opposite of codependence, right? Like, just let that simmer in the back
I
of your
want to
mind.
get into that.
Right? That's
Yeah.
it's a different take on it. And I was doing show prep and I thought, well, we don't want to be codependent. So if we don't want to be codependent,
What
is there
are
an
we?
Opposite? What are we? What is the goal? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So what
that'll-
is the positive of a verse of that?
Right. So I think that'll be fascinating, honestly. Very excited to have the book coming out. I need to get with Neil. I need to get with you, man. And we got cover designs. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw the cover today.
Yeah. What'd you
I
think?
really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got a choice that we want to, maybe do a poll, we play around with that kind of thing, and we got 2 different. I know we like the one. Don't say which one
Yeah.
the one we like,
I
but
won't like it. I mean, I won't.
you won't
You know-
like
I
it.
do like it. I won't talk about
Does
it.
it have the eyeball? It does have the eyeball.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's the same.
Now, you know how long it took him to decide on the eyeball?
On the
But
actual
it-
eyeball.
Do you
For a
remember this?
Yes, it was forever. Do you like
The
this?
first
Do you
one?
like this? Do you like this? And I felt like I was in an ophthalmologist office. Is it this?
Looking
You
at the
see this?
different eyes.
Yeah.
Option 1 or option
Well,
2?
the publishers gave me like all these eyes. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
what am I
it's a
supposed to
big
do?
decision. It's like
Yeah.
going to print forever. Like,
right, right. So it's coming together in that regard. I now have a sense that it'll be at the end of the year, which will be just in time for Christmas presents and all that kind of stuff. So that's working out to be a lot
Cool.
cooler than the first.
so proud
first
of you.
go-round. Thank you. That's very kind of you. John, what do we need them to do with SARS and clickings and all this kind of stuff? And help
Give us 5 stars.
Yes,
and,
it helps us out tremendously. We're pushing to get YouTube subscribers. We want to get up to 1,000. And Neil, I actually thought we might need to do like a 24-hour show. That's what a podcast we did. You had mentioned it.
I've mentioned it
Y'all-
in the past. Of
y'all-
doing,
y'all down to do a
maybe
20
not like a 24-hour one, but just a live stream.
Until
no.
we get
No.
some subscribers.
You're
Yeah.
gonna have some stuffed here with a hat and sunglasses, and it will not be me.
Oh,
Okay.
who is that?
Well, it'll just be a stuffed
Confused.
dummy.
Oh, you're saying
I want a
no.
mannequin because I don't know if I could.
We'll get you more Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com is the way that you contact us. This is the human emotional experience. We do endeavor to do this together. Figure it out. First Horizon is our sponsor. We love them being on board. They are awesome. What do you remember about First Horizon Bank?
They're based out of Memphis.
Yes.
Got it.
They're very,
They have over 400.
very person first. Huh?
330. John likes to say
330.
400. We're
Yeah.
overestimating.
Oh.
the
They really care
branches.
about your financial
John's go-
literacy.
John's going to his book. He wants to confirm or deny this.
I
this,
want
this
to
number.
find out.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm just saying they really care about financial literacy and making sure that you're making the best decisions for your financial needs and wants.
So First Horizon Bank, thanks for supporting us. Go support them. So I have a current event, and I'm doing this just because we did a show on menopause, and anytime, honestly, I've made a pledge in my own brain. I'm going to come clean with you listening. You, the listener, I'm going to come clean and say I've kind of figured out anytime for a little while that I see this in my sphere, a news program, a paper, a magazine, an email, whatever, wherever I happen to see it, I want to bring that up because I think it's a national dialogue that's really just beginning. I am going to exclude commercials because I see the commercials for new medicines.
Yeah,
Have
the
you
hot
noticed
flashes.
that?
and
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
I noticed them more now that we've talked about menopause.
Yeah, well-
that I'm just like, oh, okay.
I think you notice it because it's brand new.
There used
Yeah,
to
maybe.
be, I guess it was a medication. It was over the counter. It was called Pamperin.
I
Have
remember
you
that.
remember that? Because you're a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I do remember that.
And it showed a very bitchy woman.
I don't
and took
remember
her
that.
Pamperin, and she was fine.
Oh,
It
really?
says, yeah, it was very
Lord.
demeaning of females.
serious?
Very demeaning.
Wow.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it is a new dialogue because I think what you're kind of making my brain work there, John, in saying that when hormone replacement therapy was new, it got demonized unfairly because of the research study. We've talked about that on the show before. And during that time, when was that? Like late 80s or something,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it was a little bit more like mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Then it went away for 20 years.
Right.
I wonder why.
I don't know.
It's so strange.
Okay, I guess there was there was the studies with increased cancers. and
Right,
that
the
sort of
HRT.
thing. HRT.
And we talked about why those increased cancers were, that was a farce, sort of a false premise study that was done. Anyway, the current event is that I happen to see on my medical provider's regular newsletter, they had a piece that they had written about menopause, and I thought that was really cool. And it was about the hormone replacement treatment options, but still, it was just it was on a regular newsletter, and I thought that was noteworthy. So super quick current event because we have another section mentor moment that we wanted to get to before we got to our topic. So, what you got?
Okay, so this week, and I usually bring up things that are occurring in my day-to-day job, but I was curious on kind of what are y'all's kind of game plan? Like, how do you first approach a couple who has dealt with cheating or infidelity? Like, I know every therapist is different. They kind of, the things they cover, what they talk about kind of at the beginning, or like their kind of process for working through with couples, like where do you go? So I was kind of curious on like what y'all do when it comes to cheating / infidelity within not just a marriage, but any kind of like romantic relationship.
Well, I think you have to listen very carefully. I think if there's a lot of philandering going on, cheating on the male's part, is there something deeper rooted within him that's causing that? That he may be cheating as a result of being compulsively doing this,
Right.
so it'd be satirism, I guess, would be
Yeah.
named after the satyr, which is from Greek and Roman mythology.
Very cool word.
Yes, very, very much. And so part of that is that. The other is to be able to reestablish if there is room for treatment and working, is to be able to reestablish trust. I've got to say that it's very difficult, at least in my experience, working with couples, and forgiveness, and being able to really, can I really trust my spouse with this?
Right.
Moving forward. And I think in that aspect, it's also true for the male if the female has cheated, and so is to go back to fundamentals and just sort of break it down and go from the get-go.
What do you mean break it down, go to fundamentals?
Well, I think then is that how did they establish their relationship to begin with, their marriage?
Right.
And if there's always been some questions and doubt in their minds and that sort of thing, that hurt is going to keep reappearing in itself. And so you have to be very listen very hard and listen to their stories, and then say, okay, how do we build again and build this marriage and the relationship? And it may mean for a while that let's say the man has to leave, in this case the man cheating, leaving the house for some time before he can come back.
So you think that's sometimes okay to do? Do you ever advise like that couples do
I
that?
don't. I'm a counselor. I don't give advice.
Right.
Oh gosh.
Right. Or do you ever suggest or
Yeah, we talk about that. We discuss, but
Like
it's
if
their
that's something
decision.
that's needed.
It's an option if
Right.
that's the decision, because there might be a part that wound is so fresh, so raw, that every time that person comes in,
they're reliving it.
they're reliving
In
it,
their head,
and they're
right.
re-traumatized over and over again.
Right. Okay.
And then the other thing is that, and God forbid, if the children are used as weapons,
Right.
they
Okay.
weaponize the children.
So I think I'd like to kind of take a not a different track, but I'd like to parse it just a touch, because
for it.
I think there's two pieces that go onto this, and a lot of times what you're going to get is this is in the initial start of a couples counseling experience.
Right.
Sometimes it comes in the middle of a relationship, of a therapy relationship, but oftentimes it's at the
It's
start.
usually why they're here.
Often, yes.
Right.
And so I like to think of it as two very different components. One is infidelity recovery, and the other is, as you say, fundamentals, John, right? Like getting at what got you here. And of course you're doing assessments all the
Yeah.
while. If something's burning and rotting at somebody and they're, like you just said, you have to deal with that.
Yeah.
That has to be the primary issue, because safety always first, emotional safety as much as physical. But if you get away from the moment with the reality of an affair and you get at the patterns, is where I always want to go, then you can really begin to understand what got us here, and a primary question that needs to be answered from the cheating spouse is what led you to do this? What unmet need was there for you?
Right.
But that moves into the recovery of the marriage, which I agree, John, is difficult. However, I'd like to make a really clear highlight. Very, very possible. As a matter of fact, oftentimes I have seen people overcome this, and young couples would think that to never be possible.
Right.
But it absolutely is. And so you got to start, I think, with the foundations, because people will be raging on situations. And if it's not the infidelity as the part, it's the fight that was the part, or it was the family challenge that was the issue. Couples love to be issue driven.
Right.
I want to get out of the issue driven mess. Does
So
that make
is
Yeah, that makes sense.
So is there anything that y'all specifically avoid when working with couples?
void?
Like, do you avoid? Like, is there? And does that make sense? Is there anything that you don't do? Like, that you make sure that you
Honestly,
don't
nothing
do?
really comes to mind. I
I
don't.
haven't.
I don't know what would you think we wouldn't do.
Like for me, I think about I try not to let myself. I don't really have an issue with it, but let the couple like blame the other person for why they cheated. Like I did this because of you.
Yeah, I mean but that gets at the patterns. I mean,
Yeah.
Sure,
I just wasn't sure if there was anything that y'all like typically avoid
in that way.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I
I think
think
you answered my question.
the
yeah.
haranguing, and I think that's where, let's say, when I've had some of my more colorful clients, that there's a lot of blaming, and that has to stop. You just can't have that.
Right.
Right. Yeah. It's that you just go into
Just
a
go cycle.
complete rabbit hole for
Yeah.
a while with that. But
Yeah.
that's cool.
Okay.
Helpful. Cool.
Yeah.
I love the topic, and I wanted to get at that because I think that there's some cool things in getting out
Right.
into the marriage world. And
What I think is
foundation,
also
foundation,
interesting
foundation.
whenever we do this is like seeing y'all's different viewpoints and like how y'all do, like even just here, like y'all, but like he kind of approaches it a little bit differently than you do, like and just seeing how I like that.
It's like going to the good bones, and breaking it down, going to and building back
Absolutely.
up.
Yeah,
I love that. That is an
Yeah.
awesome metaphor. Get the good bones and build them up. Okay, so compassion tends to get confused with codependency, or codependency tends to get confused with compassion. And I said it the wrong way. I wanted to correct myself because I thought this was a cool way to talk about the marriage and relationships and substance abuse realities, mixing them together because we hadn't really talked about some of those things in a little bit. Also, in your honor, Victoria, I did in my mind like a total ADD thing. If you realize, like our topics had nothing to do with each other this month. Did you guys notice that? We started with ADD, then we went to professionalism, and now we're like on codependence. It's like totally
fine.
unrelated. Well, I did that on purpose though. Usually I try to link them together and build off things a little bit. But this is like random. You're not impressed.
well, I think that's okay.
Okay.
I don't know why you're bringing it up.
Because my brain works that
That's
way.
okay.
Okay. People will think they're being compassionate
Right.
when they're actually falling into codependent traits.
But I love him.
That's a little bit of my premise, right?
Right.
What do you mean by that, John? Why that?
Well, that's where the person would, let's say that is having, the person is that they're in a relationship with is maybe drinking to excess or using drugs, or another example would be cheating and saying
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I'm going to help improve him. I'm going to make him better. I cannot believe how many people say that still.
It is amazing.
It is amazing. Well, I thought I could help him. And but it's more their need to belong and to be accepted by somebody.
The codependent
The
person's
codependent
need
yeah
to belong
yeah.
and be accepted. Yeah. It's
No, I'm just wondering, do you, because I know you're specific, like you specifically mentioned relationships, but I recently had a client who it was like a light bulb in their brain when I mentioned that they possibly had a codependent relationship with the coworker.
oh
And
wow. Okay.
they were like, I mean, it was one of those cool moments from my side
Right.
where you like see the light bulb go off in their head and
That
they're
is
like,
cool,
they
yeah.
finally, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, I think you're right. Like, I think I've had a codependent relationship or still have a codependent relationship, like with this coworker. And we worked through it and we talked about it. And it was just so like, I think,
Is that a one-off though? Do you think that person may also have other relationships?
oh yeah, no, I told her, I
characteristics?
said, you must, well,
that
she
was going to
definitely,
be my
yeah.
question, John.
Yeah.
Victoria, I bet you were thinking about codependency, seeing it in marriage or whatever,
Yeah.
and then see it here, and you applied it there. Is
Oh
that-
yeah, I mean, we also talked about how
just moves.
they are probably codependent in their romantic relationship as well, and like in other relationships in their life. And so we talked about it, and I think that that's important for people to realize is it's codependency doesn't just happen. I mean, we talked about that one kid that I have that I'm like 90% sure that they're codependent with one of their parents.
Right.
And so like
Yeah,
it's not just romantic relationships that you can find yourself in it's codependency with.
I love that you did that and led us there, Victoria, because that's a part of what I want us to think here today about is codependency has become one of these buzzwords in the public nowadays, which
Yeah.
I love, but we need to, they mean something to us, and we need to be accurate about how we're understanding what's going on and what we do about it.
Right.
Because people get very confused about it, and it does happen. That's why I said in the front end, the day-to-day, the real routine parts of life. And that's a perfect example of how the codependence in your life here plays out with somebody at work there. You know, and you could really work with that.
Yeah.
And you did in session there. So definitions. It's funny because producer Neil, he went and got a definition for us. I actually left it blank. And he went to dictionary.com. So I guess
Go,
in your
Neil.
honor, Neil, I will read it because I just had it in my own head. He found codependence, excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. And the key word there is excessive. Typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But I went and got the definition for compassion because listen to how it's different. The genuine concern for others' well-being, accompanied by a desire to alleviate their suffering and promote growth. I can see where people get that real confused.
For sure.
Right?
I feel like I wouldn't even get that confused
Yeah.
sometimes.
The way that I have found to define definition of codependence, I think cuts through the level of confusion.
Okay.
Right?
Go. Shoot.
If I'm codependent on John, I am well, right? John, if you are well, then I am well. But John, if you are not well, then I am not well.
Yeah.
So my effort, goal, behavior is designed to make you well so that I will be well.
You're going to fix me.
I'm going to fix you. I'm going to make it right. I'm going to solve the problem. You know, like I need to make you well because it's about me being well. And that has nothing to do with having compassion for John.
Right.
I'm not compassionate
it's
for
all,
you.
I gotta be me. It's all about me.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the key word there is that you say is that you need John to be well so that you can be well because it is ultimately, it's kind of like a
in the
a
codependence
fakeness
realm,
of
I
like
am what
being
he is.
selfless. Like from an outside, I can see where you kind of would tell yourself, like, if you're the code, like, oh, I'm being selfless. Like, I just want John to be well. But it's really actually a selfish thing because you want John to be well so that you can be well.
And the trouble is the persons don't really realize that that's happening.
Oh, yeah. My client, when we talked about the fact that they in a codependent. I mean, just the look on their face was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the
You know?
one of the things is as a minister as well, and at seminary we talked about that quite a bit. Just in my as I was studying, as we were studying pastoral care and all that, is that a minister has to be very careful not to believe the propaganda or what somebody says about them, because they find themselves being, did you like my sermon? Did you like, look at what I've done? Look at all
Yeah,
these
you
things.
may be
I'm doing."
codependent yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Codependent. Yeah.
Well, as a young therapist, I mean, I can totally remember
Mm-hmm.
being like, am I doing a good job? Did I do something wrong? How could I have done that better? I don't want to damage anybody's life.
Oh, I
mean,
can remember times where I went to Casey and
Yeah, as
was
a
like,
your
I don't know,
supervisor.
yeah, who has been on the podcast before and been
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she's like, okay, like walk me through it. She's like, you already know what to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to like believe that you can do it.
There
It's
is
a little
a
bit of like
level-
imposter syndrome mixed in there.
Certainly,
With it.
yeah, certainly. There's a little bit of codependence mixed in with that, because if as a professional our client's not well, we're not well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
that is
another
not
really-
how you
I'm a
want
really
be
good therapist.
No,
Oh,
Every-
really
gosh.
not. Right.
Yeah.
Really, really not.
Difference between empathy and compassion is that we're not going there today.
We can if we need to. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
No, I'm just saying that empathy takes it even a further step, but we can talk about that later. I think the thing is that you hear about therapists developing compassion fatigue or health
yeah.
care providers.
Absolutely.
That's
an interesting
because
concept.
they're codependent.
Oh,
Think about
talk about that. You're on point. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I think you might just need to repeat that first.
Okay. Well, I think that when you hear
First of all, compassion fatigue is a term we know that for people that are in the helping profession.
yeah, they
you can
give
get
and give.
burned out. and
They get
whatnot, right?
burned out, and so you're not doing the self care. You're trying to fix other people. You're not taking and tending to your own needs. You empty out the reserves, your stores of well being in yourself, and so you. And you feel like you're a failure if you don't fix this person. I think there was a TV show back 40 years ago. It was called MASH. And
I remember.
you remember, okay. Well, all the doctors, the only person that was healthy and well balanced, I think, was the chaplain, Father Mulcahy.
You would
But-
say that.
Yeah, I would. But they all had all this compassion fatigue all the time, and I think
Yeah.
that's why. And their boundaries, they were losing their boundaries of themselves trying to save people.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I'm going to say I didn't really overtly, maybe in somewhere in there, make the connection between codependence and compassion fatigue. I think
Yeah.
you're onto something. Those are really linked, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a weird thing for
Interesting.
us professionals, I would imagine, to really admit.
Yeah.
Yeah, something we wouldn't normally want to admit.
And I'll give you another one to really deeply understand this. I know I used this on the show before, but to hit you, the listener, into this and thinking, well, that's other people, not me. Not so fast. I want you to think about it for a minute. The compassion fatigue being what looks like a parent being kind to their kid, but unfortunately making themselves what the client is the same thing that you probably do, because I'm with you, as a parent. Parents want their kids to be well. Why do they really want their kids to be well?
Because it makes their life easier.
And that makes me well, right?
When my kid's
Think about
sitting
it.
happy, eating his food,
Think about it.
doing his thing, I'm in a much better mood.
Right? I mean, Victoria, you're right in the middle of this, I think, as the little kids. But I just had, very proud Papa here for sure, guys. My
Oh, yes.
I
Uber
mean,
congratulations.
thank
on
you.
That.
My son just graduated Navy boot camp.
Hoorah!
Yeah, hoorah!
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him about that. Actually, he agreed with you, John. It's okay for me to say it. I'm still trying to get that together. But I mean, the thing is I want him to do well.
Yeah.
and to let go. I mean, he's going to be in a duty station away from us for a while, and can I still be okay even if he's struggling in boot camp, in misery? Yeah. If the Steelers were winning, I'd have done a lot better the last couple of months. But
Are you codependent on the Steelers?
I am codependent on the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you see what we're after? Like, how well can you tolerate your kid struggling if you're codependent? Not much. And we all fall into that trap. Like, you get sucked into this. I would argue that there's almost a universal experience in a parent-child relationship with a codependent thread.
Okay, so then how do you break that up? How do you break the cycle of like when you
well, there you go. Yeah. Now we're foreshadowing into
right?
Yeah.
Like how do
we manage that?
If I realize as a mother of a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old.
Almost 2 already?
Yeah.
Precocious.
April 2nd. Yeah. Like how if I realize that I'm codependent on my child,
likely,
then like how do I stop that?
Yeah.
And I think that's the big question for people is like, okay, and that's what we talked about with my client. Like now that we can address it, now that we can admit that like this is a thing that's happening.
But I would argue, first of all, Victoria, we have to become aware that we're doing it.
Right.
I knew some, maybe not so much as now, but as I was of that age, was that there were women that did not feel like they were truly women and mothers unless they nursed and
like breastfed.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a sense of being codependent on am I a successful mother?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm stretching a little bit.
No,
but
actually, as someone who did breastfeed, I can totally empathize with that.
Yeah, I'm sure you can empathize with that, but I'm wondering, John. I'm curious. I was just kind of trying to differentiate that. Is that something different? Is that the imposter syndrome you were talking about, Victoria? Like I'm failing in some way, rather than codependently, I am what the other person is.
Oh, okay. I hear what you're saying.
I
yeah.
can maybe.
I
both.
think she was. In this case, it was what will other people think of me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
I can't breastfeed.
Yeah. So there's
If
like
you belong to the
insecurity,
Leche
spotlight,
League and you can't breastfeed,
and
that was a big thing back in the '80s. Was the Leche League, and if you weren't breastfeeding,
you were bad.
You were bad.
A shame.
It's not.
Yeah,
like
there
fed
are
is
other
best.
things I think
Yeah.
mix in with this, but in the purest sense, which maybe it'll interject this. I mean,
Right.
we need to understand a little bit of history with what this word is. And John, I think you know it well from the histories of the substance abuse field. That's where we get the term. In the 50s and 60s, we learned a lot about addiction. And so this is an addictions term that we figured out more in the 70s and 80s when people like Claudia Black did work on family dynamics in addiction. And so you hear a kissing cousin or a subset of codependence is the word, enabling. So you've heard of enabling. Well, codependence is like or enabling is a form of codependence. And this is all about alcoholic, drug addict, crazy person, spouse usually is highly codependent. I would almost say universally. And that is taking away the problems, figuring out all of the complications, buying the alcohol even. You get all kinds of crazy
going to the ABC
behavior.
store,
Yes.
doing that. And I've
Calling the boss when you're hungover. Like there's all of these crazy behaviors that happened in those relationships.
Right.
Thus, the term codependent was born.
Right. Okay.
Well,
Makes sense.
And I think that it's very pernicious. And I think in terms of sometimes even moms and dads are codependent with their kids and buying into their drug abuse. And I think you'll see a lot more of that now.
Sure.
Particularly with the fentanyl crisis and the opiates, but alcohol as well.
Well, listen, this is such a powerful, like, kind of connector that I don't think you can have an alcoholic that is married to somebody who's not codependent. Like, it's super rare. Now,
Right.
when a parent has a child that becomes chemically dependent in some way, you get induced into. Like you get, it's almost
Yeah.
an irresistible force.
Yeah.
It's that powerful that you get into these crazy behaviors, and you're like, why am I dumping stuff down the drain? Like, who does that, right? But codependent people do. So I'm just trying to say, like, we fall into these traits very powerfully because the behavior with alcohol and drugs is so loud.
And then there's the natural biological bonds of wanting to protect your child.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
And you want to do anything for your child, and that basically can make you sick and make you unwell.
And this is why I say in parenting, not as dramatic as substance abuse families, you parents, all you parents out there, have a thread. I should say all of us parents out there and in here,
Right.
we have a thread of this, and you have to guard against it.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the history and what happens really with parenting, for sure. Oh, I said, yeah, how does this develop naturally, Victoria? You talked about that, right? Like, do you find this? Are you finding this? How is this beginning to sort of take shape? It's so early on.
And it might be because I'm a therapist, even though we are our own worst clients.
Oh, we suck at this at
just
home.
like how doctors are
Or
their
I
own
should
worst
say,
patients.
I suck at this at home. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. Why do you think most therapists have their own therapist? Like
The good ones anyway.
yeah. But I think, dang it, I said it.
What?
It's okay.
I missed it.
I said the word.
Oh no, you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't do the did you?
I did.
Oh dear.
But in my
Make it
person,
into a zen.
I think I'm
Do that.
experiencing it now, or at least trying to prevent it, especially as my kid gets older and is talking more and he's able to actually communicate how he's feeling. Then I feel like
interesting.
I am
Yeah.
trying, or at least going to try, to be proactive with my husband as well. Although I would probably say it tends to run in mothers more.
I
Is that
disagree.
wrong? Disagree?
Yeah,
Okay.
I disagree.
But yeah, work with my husband to like make sure that we don't fall into the trap of like becoming codependent on our kid, and also creating an environment where our kid doesn't become codependent on us.
Oh, you're going to have
Oh,
so,
nice.
so many opportunities
so,
to develop codependency.
What's that, John?
So
I
what?
think you got
Yeah,
kinda.
make
Bonk it?
yeah. No, that you'll have so many opportunities to become codependent,
Yes.
mutually codependent.
You have to guard against many moments.
Yes.
Right. And I guess also like just being aware of it is a great way to.
Well, you said something there. I want to get back. I know we maybe got you off
Yeah.
track. I sort of postulated in my mind when I was framing up how to cover this from an
Right.
interesting angle of compassion being confused with codependency. And then I was looking at the history of codependency. I thought it is naturally a part of parenting that people miss. And I thought, oh my God, Victoria is fascinatingly right in the middle of this developing.
dab.
And I figured there was stuff that we might trigger or think about
Yeah.
given that reality. And you did what I just suspected we would be able to do. As the child, because this is totally new in
Yeah.
my thinking, but as the child develops, right, from a baby to quickly beginning to, at very early stages of psychological development, let you know what is going on with him.
Yeah.
He's being more communicative.
Not just
He's being
nonverbals.
he's being more descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
And that begins to really induce you, doesn't it, into
Yeah.
like the human game. I want you to make me feel good.
Right.
That's
Because
the whole
I feel
goal.
good when you feel good. Yeah.
And if I'm really good at it, then you will like actually be codependent on me, and I'll get more of what I want.
Right.
It's a terrible
Which is
game.
why I think that you can have parents be codependent on their kids, but you can also have kids be codependent on their parents.
That's where we cut you off.
Yeah.
The reverse of that is interesting too. What do you mean by that?
Well, and then I just mean where, and I having worked in a school, I feel like I have seen this a lot. But you have kids who, like, you can tell when they're codependent on their parents or a parent specifically more than another because of their constant discussion of like wanting to make that person happy, because then it makes their life easier. It makes them happy. And I think maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would see that in like a lot of families where there's abuse. Because
Yeah.
because if dad's happy, then dad's not going to hit me, which means
Eggshells.
I'll be happy, you know.
Tremendous.
And-
Or
As
if
a matter of
if
fact-
mom's happy, she she won't withhold my food.
As a
And
matter-
then then I'll be happy because then I'll get to eat food,
As a matter of fact, I'm going to back you up with that and say that I curious what you think too about this, John. I think it's loudest in a substance abuse family dynamic, the addict or alcoholic and the spouse. Second in line would be an abusive family, and
Right.
that's kind of a new thought too. What do you?
I was just thinking. Well, no, I was going and taking it to its extreme. Is Munchausen's by proxy? Is the
Oh boy,
yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah.
What is Munchausen's and?
Okay, what it is that Baron von Munchausen was a fabulous, basically, in from the 18th century, and he was a baron, and he made up these elaborate stories. And they were just pure fantasy. And he said he was in all these battles and that sort of thing. And he had flying machines back in the 18th century. By proxy means is usually a mother, can be man, but usually a mother who basically makes the kid sick on purpose.
Yeah.
And of course the kid is going and having this done to him or to her, so that they get a lot of it. The mother gets a lot of attention and sympathy, and the kid is saying, I kind of depend on this person, and so even if I suspect something, I'm not going to do this. And
Yeah,
in
like
fact-
codependence is wrapped all
Codependent.
around
The
this.
Yeah.
biggest example of that is Gypsy Rose Blanchard,
yeah.
who
Don't know that.
who became famous because she created a plot to kill her mom because
Oh, okay.
She
beca-
did.
Yeah, and well, they did kill her mom. She got
This is
like
recent,
a boyfriend.
right?
Boyfriend.
Well, no, she just got released from jail.
Yeah.
This happened 90s.
No. It was early.
2000s?
It was in the aughts, in the 2000s.
Yeah, and so
I mean, she got out early,
yeah, but it's been in the news recently because she just got released from.
Okay.
and they did a documentary.
Yeah,
on
there's
it.
so many documentaries, but she's the most famous case
Of Munchausen.
of Munchausen's by proxy because of like, and they would, I mean, her mom would move her from city to city as soon as they thought a doctor would start finding out. And so I think you're right. That is the very extreme case of like
Yeah.
codependency.
Yeah, and you could say, well, there could be like a mother would say, no one's ever going to love you like I love you.
yeah.
And
So you almost feel trapped.
You feel
like
trapped.
you can't go anywhere.
and so you actually play into that and embrace it
Right.
eventually.
So this whole idea, right? Like compassion, we think we're being helpful, or think we're, how did you put it, John? Because I love her.
Because I love you.
I want to be your rock. I want to make everything well. And it's like, wait a minute, like this compassion gets us in such a nasty place. And what's so cruel is you don't even know it. So when you fall into these traps, let's spend a little bit of time on why is this so bad? Like, what is it that codependence leads to? Why do we not want that? And that'll lead us into talking about the opposites, which is a fascinating thing we agreed at the front end to talk about. Why do we not want codependency? What says y'all?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times codependency means that you can't really like stand on your own, in a sense of like being able to know what
Loss
you're
of individuation.
Yeah, know what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, where it comes from. You're always basing it off like someone else instead of. So I think it kind of prevents a lack of insight, maybe into like
100%.
into your own well-being and your own emotional well-being and like your own emotional intelligence of like knowing like, okay,
Well, I think
how I
that's
feel.
why they call it, leaving the nest. is
Yeah.
you want the person to be as equipped and fully prepared for life as possible. You can't do it all for them, but at the same time, you can give them principles of, and strength and so that they can have resilience and independence.
Well, it's funny, John. I mean, it occurs to me you're describing compassion, right? We said genuine concern for others' well-being, accompanied by a desire to alleviate suffering and promote growth. It is a pretty good definition. When we're talking about, a compassion component. But in the opposite of that, man, get down and dirty with codependency. I mean, I think you're touching on the idea, Victoria, that look, it is a miserable existence. I mean, you do more than just lose the ability to even know what you're feeling. I mean, think of the powerlessness, the utter despair, the lack of confidence and groundedness. It's like you're literally kind of emotionally depending on the emotional disposition of another person.
I remember working with a couple. He was he was a medical missionary. He said he was a doctor. He wasn't. He had been in the Navy, and he was an X-ray technician. And he went to the Philippines with his wife and his 3 kids, and they lived in a village, primitive, stone-aged village, and she would do anything for him. I mean, he would walk in front of her, and she would walk behind him. She was covered with sores, and all of this, and it was because he had this mission that he had to do more than anything else. That they developed cholera, had to be hospitalized.
Oh my goodness!
At the Naval Hospital in Subic Bay in the Philippines. That is, to me, an ultimate act of in his part, delusion, but in her part, codependency.
Yeah.
She didn't have a boundary where she was her separate person.
So basically literally killed herself.
Literally killed herself doing that. They shipped them out. They came back a year later.
It's thank you for that, John, right? Like, because it gives a powerful imagery. And I think, what I would say to you, the listener, right? Like, people in your life that you almost, in louder versions of this, it's really almost cringeworthy. Because if your person that you're observing, you feel like, wow, that's really kind of them to be that way with their spouse. Wow, I really admire that. You're not talking about codependence, because we would look on the woman that John just described, and people around that are just like, wow, that's a lot. Wow, I'm worried about them. That wow, they're really that's not going to work out for them, and
Or
we
like,
have.
What the bleep is going on?
Right. Because, I mean, it's like, look, from an outside looking in, you can see it and observe the desperation that you're trying to do something impossible. You're trying to make somebody something that you want them to be so that you will be that. Like, and if you observe that system,
Yeah.
it's cringeworthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like cults.
Oh. Go there.
I don't even know if we want to get into that, but
Go
I
ahead.
can
No,
almost
go there.
assume that most people who are in cults or a cult leader are both codependent.
Okay. Can I just stop this, though?
Yeah.
Either heavily are already, or like a parent to somebody who
Yeah.
develops a substance abuse problem, a kid,
Right.
strongly gets inducted in
Right.
unless you stop it.
Right.
So I don't want to set up that, if you're in a cult, you always were.
Right.
You can get inducted
yeah.
in, too.
You could become a part of a cult faster than you would even know. I mean, it was
Right. Right.
It's
Anybody
very
who's
seductive.
non-codependent. Yeah.
That's right. If you don't get enough food, you don't get enough sleep, you get a very intense
Deprived of things.
deprived
yeah.
of things, you can
Fall into it.
Fall into it. So no one's immune from it.
Right.
Oh yeah. No.
But I would think in terms of a cult is that person may not be the cult leader may not be codependent. He may be sociopathic
Not
or
Delusional.
narcissistic.
Right.
But that person gets
The person following them.
and that narcissistic person, that psychopathic or sociopathic person will manipulate them to become codependent.
right.
So there is a whole lot of overwhelm with this. There is a whole lot of powerlessness with this. And then actually a lot of resentment kicks in too when you begin to notice, why am I so angry and resentful in this relationship? Well, you need to maybe sometimes stop and look at why you feel overwhelmed and why you have the excessive people pleasing and feeling out of control. You know, your resentment might be telling you, hey, you got elements of codependence here. And that's why you feel so desperate.
Right.
You're trying to make somebody something so that you will be okay. And it's an impossible task. I'm telling you. I mean, those of you that understand substance abuse family dynamics, I mean, the spouse runs around an attic. It's utterly maddening. They're dumping liquor down the drain. They're making preemptive phone calls to people to make sure that there's alcohol at the party. Like they're telling the kids straight up lies.
A whole community could be like that if the person is prominent enough. I mean, they can.
Sure.
I get pulled over by anyone else gets pulled over. They go to jail. This prominent person is politician. I know this is it was in South Texas. They would just drive them home, and
Right.
yeah,
Codependent on a mass level. That's interesting. Yeah, it's a destructive reality. It really is. So let's get to, before we go too far, I think we've got a good characterization of this. And we're layering out a little bit of the stereotypes, or the myths rather, about how not to allow what appears to you like you being compassionate into the trap of being codependent. So what's the opposite here?
It's the opposite.
What is the opposite of codependence? It's a bit of a weird
Well, it's
question.
definitely not dependence.
Right?
and it's not.
Right.
And I would say that it's not exactly independence. I think it's interdependence. Okay.
I feel like this is where
I
Chris
love
would
that.
say, "Tell us more about that, John."
She just did.
Okay, well, what
Nicely
I'm
done,
thinking
Victoria.
is that with interdependence, if you're truly independent, you're not necessarily in communication with the other person that's significant. In other words, you've had the Declaration of Independence and you form your own country and all of that.
Right.
But interdependence is you're still within the same family, but you have clear, defined boundaries. You rely on each other. You're able to say, there are times when I have to depend on you. You know, let's say if I get sick or something like that, then there's that dependence that takes place. But it also recognizes the idea is to go back into the equilibrium, which would be I go back in able to operate. And so there's that give and take that goes back and forth. So that's interdependence.
I'm smiling from ear to ear, I'm aware, because I am in lockstep with you yet again, John.
Surprise, surprise.
I have this scale that I created in my mind that talks exactly what you're talking about. And I almost feel like it's a scale of, like, you know, a level of health. I think I've said this on the show before, but if you look at when you meet, greet, mate, date, whatever, you're in relationship with somebody, you have this first quarter of the scale. You can't see me on the audio podcast, so you got to tune into YouTube podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube lives and click the yellow bell so you can see my hand move right now. Sorry, little plug for the YouTube. Victoria's eyes are rolling. Okay, let me get back to it. So, really, you've got an interrelatedness. You're related, rather, right? You have a relationship and you relate, and then you move to, John, exactly what you were talking about, interrelatedness. Right? But then you cross over this bad line and you go into the codependent realm.
Falling down,
Right.
yeah. The
And
downward
then you
slope.
get into the course, the dependent. So this exact awesome spot in the middle, I guess, is the trick question kind of, John. That's where my brain goes to: interrelated, interdependent.
Exactly. And you know what? It happens. We see it when it's healthy. Like, for example, when you see your kids grow up, they become more independent, but then they're still, later on, as you grow older, you kind of depend on your kids a little bit more. There's that interdependence. You listen to each other.
I've learned from my
Yeah.
son tremendously
Right.
as he's been out in the world. Yes.
So there's that sense of so what is when one is truly interdependent, one is actually at the highest functioning level of autonomy. Of autonomy. You're autonomous. So you're actually functioning better. It's like you don't want to make the gasoline too rich because it's going to, the engine,
It'll burn too hot.
it'll burn too hot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a little bit of a fear on people's part of being codependent, and therefore you fall into a trap of being maybe unfortunately more of the opposite, which we don't want, which is a fearful attachment styles. I want to be independent. I don't want to be too close. I don't want to fall into that trap. So I'll remain distant, safely farther away than I need to be, because what you're describing, John, is the very natural state. I mean, if my wife is having a bad day and I'm simply disconnected and don't care and have my complete own mood unaffected by that, that's kind of weird. I would hope she feels a little sadness when I'm stressed the heck out, So there's an interrelatedness that you're describing.
I have a very brave client who has parents that have split, and they're split religion as well. But there's a sense that they are wanting to get too. They want to hold on to her too tight, but they will make her miserable, and so
Squash the spirit.
Squash the spirit. And she's saying, I've got to navigate that, and she is intentional about her interdependence.
Interesting.
And she's very intentional about how she's raising her boys, that they won't have that not to be raised thinking there's something wrong with me because my mom thinks I'm too fat or my dad does this.
Critical. Falling.
Critical, overcritical. So she's a very brave client, I think.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm listening to you talk about your client there who's courageous to address these things. I don't know if we have time to address this, but fresh off my brain is like, there's another angle there that you're touching on, John, that's like, what about receiving codependence? So like, when your spouse becomes codependent on you, and it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of a yuck feeling.
Yeah.
But you're not codependent on them.
Right. So in being in
So
a
what do you
position
think?
where you're sort of interrelated and whatnot, but they start to be codependent, that's a weird feeling to get. That's got to be a weird thing to receive.
And I think you see that a lot of times with people that maybe there's a lot of sickness. It's an unequal.
Right.
Yeah. And so how do you encourage let's say, the compassion in your relationship, the mutual compassion, and say, okay, this person can't do as much physically or contribute financially. That doesn't mean that person doesn't contribute a lot in terms of raising children and that sort of thing.
Or keeping the home, or
keeping the
just
home
doing
and all of that.
what they
And
can
so,
do.
so and not being a douche about it, and bring it up and say, look what I do, And
Victoria loved the word douche coming out of John.
Yeah, it's just hilarious.
I was going to use another word. that started
You
with a
did
D,
good.
and
Keep
so I
it
didn't.
family. Keep it family. So, okay, where do we need to get to before we run out of time? The article that I found that you'll find in the show notes really is, I think, kind of cool. It introduced some new concepts when I was playing around with this issue in my head. What's the opposite of codependency? Have you ever heard of counterdependent? We're developing new terms, John, in real life.
I have not heard of that.
Counterdependent. They are driven by fear of relying on others. So basically, you counter codependently to be too distant. It's
It's like that Tom Petty song, "Refugee." You don't have to live like a refugee. Yeah. So in other words, or you're out, a desperado. You're out there mending fences because you stay away from the relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
You're just a refugee, you know. You don't want to come into the land, don't want to come
Uh-huh.
into the house. You just stay out on the prairie. It's like, it's like I'm counter-dependent. I'm so fearful of being codependent that I'm not even going to talk to you, Victoria. He's going to stay my distance. I don't want to do it even.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and these are very fearful attachment styles, and that's a real thing that we come across. I mean, it creates
Counterdependency.
great.
Wow, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, counter dependency. Great intimacy issues, great levels of distrust and fears that kind of go into that. So, relax, guys. We can be related with each other. We can be engaged, with each other and not like lose ourselves. So, how do we do with this? I mean, what is the contingency? I guess kind of getting back in a little bit more, Victoria, to your question, like, as a new mom, how can you avoid this as a spouse? Oh, here's an interesting question. John, you're more of the substance abuse professional, so I'll pose it to you. Like, is it? Oh, this is interesting. How's John going to respond to this?
Oh no!
He should be nervous.
What fresh hell is this?
Is it possible for a spouse of a full-blown alcoholic to be non-codependent?
Oh, that
Right?
I don't think so.
I know,
I
right?
don't think so. I think that's why it's so important for the spouse to get as much counseling as the person. The difference is the
Isn't that
codependent
something?
is part of the alcoholic
Yeah.
or the addicted dynamic, and so that person needs to also recover.
Yeah. I mean, we have Alan on for that
Yeah,
reason.
exactly.
Right.
And they do the steps.
I'll tell you this, though, because I would fall into the same notion, sort of no, it's not possible. I have had, and I'm actually thinking of somebody right now that, I quoted her in my book, actually. I really did. I quoted her as in wrapping up my book of marriage by using her quote. And a little history to that is that she is the spouse of an addict, and over the years, I mean, they've been together for like a long time, guys, married, and he was in and out of it, and I'm talking about pretty rough stuff. I mean, it was cocaine and street level stuff. I mean, it was rough in a lot of ways. And what she was able to say is, and that's the quote in the book, is, I said I do, and I effing meant it. It's one of the ways I ended my book. So as to like highlight the commitment that you make. And I don't know her. I didn't meet her in that regard. It was, but I just have a strong sense that she wasn't that codependent, John.
Yeah.
By talking to the addict person
Yeah.
over the years, how she coped, how that worked, and what that was about. Like,
I think it's the same.
gotta be tough, but
Well,
yeah.
I think it's the same way as you're asking me how I, approach it with my almost 2-year-old. I think if you can, in the same regards of like, if you can acknowledge it, become aware of it, like, then I think you can
be well.
Yeah, you can be more like proactive about, and maybe I'm totally off base here.
No,
John.
I agree
Okay.
with you. I think, in other words, the person doesn't seek help, or let's say the person just keeps slipping and having relapses and all of that. That doesn't mean that the spouse or the partner can't get better.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
but there's a point where that person doesn't go into this. Like, there's a point when this person says, "Oh my God, look at this mess that we're in."
Yeah.
So
And-
what? Sorry, I
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I
stump.
interrupted you.
No, I'm done. I made
so
my point.
I think you.
Y'all are funny.
So I think you combat that by doing things like therapy.
Right.
So
Al-Anon
like if
therapy.
Al-Anon therapy, if you are a parent in my position, or who thinks
Parents
that
don't need to be alone.
Yeah, like I mean, heck, I see several people who are spouses of alcoholics.
Oh, yeah.
Or
In therapy,
or people
sure.
who have addiction.
If you know what
And
you're
I
looking
think-
for, you'll
yeah.
find it a lot.
Yeah, and so I think I think it is possible, because I think if you can be proactive about it, then you can address it if it's already happening, or you can be proactive in prevention.
An interesting word of caution, though, is it is so hard. And I
I'm
think
not
I'm
saying
going to
it's
highlight
easy.
the reality of alcoholic dysfunctional relationships, drug addict dysfunctional relationships, number one. And also, number two, when you're in the abusive relationship or you have domestic violence relationship. Equally so. Question is, can a spouse with somebody who has been abusive be non-codependent? And the answer is the same, yes, but man, my metaphor for addiction, if you remember, the black hole, it sucks all emotional and physical resources from that addict's life and those around them. So we're literally, in a way, with that metaphor, talking about maintaining your own gravity, being so close to a black hole. It's tough.
It's spaghettification, as they say. When you go into a black hole, everything just gets drawn into.
You get
sucked into it.
It's got such. Trying to make the point that it's such a strong force with addiction and abuse.
Here's my only thought about this before is a lot of times people get into these relationships and they see that, let's say, the young man or the young woman is drinking so much into excess and having blackouts and brownouts. That person, when they get into that relationship, they see it. They deny it, but it's there. And so,
and from the codependence person, probably before they met that person.
Yeah.
Just so you know, too, by the way.
Yeah.
Listening.
So,
did that make sense? I don't think I made that point clear. What I was just referring to is you likely have a level of codependence before you get into an abusive relationship. Also, you likely have a level of codependence before you get into a marriage with somebody that has addiction. That's what I was trying to say.
That's one of those, you ought to write a little, like R.D. Laing did with knots. You know, he was a psychiatrist, and he wrote these little verbal knots that...
I'm not familiar.
Well, knots is basically little aphorisms and wisdom sayings that talk about how people get into... they get tied up in knots, basically, messed up. And so... the idea is that once you see it, you're able to untie that knot.
Yeah, and man, that's a great way to wrap up, I think, today. The beauty, listening out there, of being able to really get those knots untied, identify as a young parent or in your closest relationship with your spouse and with your family, or as Victoria said earlier, even with a coworker, a lesser relationship such as that. Like, you really can get into a relaxed, peaceful state with this. You really don't have to stay with the disempowerment. You don't really have to stay with the impossible task of trying to make somebody something that you want to be, well or otherwise. Like, get out of yourself, allow other people to know that's going on, and you really can heal from it. What a wonderful experience it has been in therapy to watch people, get free from this particular issue of codependency.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to drop it there, I think. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Of course. Great topic today.
We'll see you next week. Stay well.
Bye, y'all.